Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. The topic today is leveraging the power of automation to achieve TNI accreditation. Thank you, everyone who has joined us. My name is Karen Arribiaga, and I'm an account executive here at Qualtrics. Before we get started, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, we are recording this webinar. So if you do want to watch it again, a recording will get sent out to you once it is available. And number two, there is going to be a question and answer section towards the end of the presentation. So if you have questions throughout the demo itself, please feel free to put those in the Q&A area found within the Zoom meeting, and we'll be happy to address those towards the end of the presentation. Where I wanted to get started with this image right here is I wanted to know if this looked familiar to anybody, because at the end of the day, what this is an idea of a manual system. A manual system is something that's paper-based, something that you're doing a lot of the tracking for. On the flip side, manual systems can also be electronic. So let's think about maybe you have a document repository that's a part of your LIMS system where you're manually detailing all of the changes that are happening with those documents and procedures. Or maybe you have a shared file that you have documents and Word docs and Excel files in that you're tracking it that way. Though it's electronic and people can access it electronically, it's still manual. Which brings me back to this slide. Manual systems mean that there's going to be more risk at the end of the day. And more risks also result in losing money for an organization. So when auditors first come out to an organization, at the end of the day, what they are trying to see is that you have procedures and that you have proof that you are following the procedures that you've created for your organization. They want to see records. One of the biggest risks with manual systems is the lack of, or is seeing incomplete, invalid, or missing records. So if you really want to get started with your auditor in the right direction, you want to make sure that your records are complete and that they're proving that you're following your own processes. There's also a sense of lack of accountability and no visibility in systems too. So lack of accountability, how many people in the organization live and breathe quality? How many people are actively going out to read documents and make sure that they're signing off on specific trainings that they've done? Well, sometimes the answer is they're not. Well, systems that are like Qualtrics and are automated make sure people do that. Also, low visibility is a great risk. Are you able to identify opportunities for improvement in your manual system? Are you able to really see what this is going to do, or what your quality system is able to collect and trend for you? All of these, at the end of the day, if you don't have complete records, if you don't have people really committed to their quality system, and if you don't have visibility, that's going to result in overworked quality managers. If you're in the quality manager role right now and you feel like you're overworked and really not focused on quality, it is very normal, especially if you have a manual system. Also, there's a greater risk for process deviation. If your processes aren't locked down and you're really guiding people step by step through those processes, then there is actually a chance that people can deviate from those. And at the end of the day, all of these could potentially result in a nonconformance for your organization that your auditor could find, which then has its own issues. Maybe it's a loss of license. Maybe you're not able to service your customer base anymore. Maybe you're not able to do testing in a specific state. If you lose that accreditation towards that state, at the end of the day, those are some of the risks that you'll have with these manual systems. Now, in all transparency, I am going to talk about Qualtrics. However, what I am going to tell you is there are specific things that if you are considering quality management systems like Qualtrics, there's some certain things that you need to be on the lookout for. So whether it's Qualtrics or some other document management systems, if you really want to get the benefit of automation, you want to make sure that you're really looking for some key attributes. So number one, you want to make sure that your QMS is going to give you great visibility. And this happens when your system is an all-in-one solution to really collect all of your audit needs and your QMS data in one system. That's key. If you think about that picture of all the binders on the wall that we had in the first image that you looked at, If you're going into an audit, you're probably going in and searching through different folders, trying to find different papers and records. With Qualtrics or systems like Qualtrics, you're just simply pulling up a report. You want to make sure that there's a significant amount of time savings and automation features within the software itself. Automation, the purpose of it is to make sure that you're taking out the middlemen. You're taking out the need to have all of these additional interactions between employees and letting the system really handle that, which comes down to increasing accountability, making sure that your system can email alert individuals, making sure it keeps them on time, and making sure that the tasks that they need to complete are done in that timely manner. And at the end of the day, it has that visibility so you're able to identify risks for your organization so you can take action to make sure that you can mitigate those risks so they don't happen again, or identify them so you can make sure that you get them and handle them before they even happen for your organization. And with Qualtrics and systems like Qualtrics, you often are doing this through different features. Now, these are the features for Qualtrics. The first one is document management. And I'm sure everyone here on the call has heard the need of having document management, right? Making sure your procedures are being controlled. What we're going to go through today is making sure that the document management system that you're using has the automation features in place to make sure that this process is done smoothly, it's done controlled, but more importantly, you have the information that you need so when you go into your audit, your auditor sees all that information within the system. Workflows pertain to process automation. And so we actually have a set of best-in-class workflows specifically for the TNI and NELAC requirements that we'll talk through today that really are giving laboratories a leg up for that accreditation. By automating some of these processes, it really allows you to have visibility into that data and then, again, show the records that you're meeting those requirements with the standard. Testing and training is simply tracking employee competencies, making sure that training is effective through different testing that those employees would need to do. And then last but not least, reporting. And so making sure that the full system has the ability to give you the visibility you need to have the see into your quality management system, but then also be able to go through your audits with ease. One of the questions that we typically get at Qualtrics is, well, is this for large organizations? Do large organizations need to use Qualtrics? Or I'm just a small lab with maybe 5 people, 2 people, 7 people in an organization. I feel like this could be too big for me. The reality is that Qualtrics works with a number of different types of organizations. Everything from large laboratory systems with multiple locations and large manufacturers with thousands of users, all the way down to laboratories with sometimes, I think our smallest laboratory to date is about 2 people. Because at the end of the day, the compliance pressure is usually very similar. The only difference is the number of employees. You still have to prove, whether you are a big laboratory or a small laboratory, that you're following the requirements within those standards and those clauses. Environmental and water testing laboratories is an area that we have serviced for quite some time. So some of the organizations that we work with are on the are more of a private type organization. So Alpha Analytical, Pace Analytical, Babcock Laboratories, Jupiter Laboratories. The list goes on and on. But then we also work with government-run agencies. So Austin Water, City of San Diego. Some of our smaller agencies include Pascal County Water Utilities in Florida, also Guadalupe Blanco River Authority in Texas. And so we have many, many different types of organizations that are using the system today. The other group of organizations that use it are accrediting bodies. So if you're at all familiar with ANAB and A2LA, they're accrediting bodies. Some of them might even be doing accreditations within your organization or within your state, maybe even your organization. They actually use Qualtrics themselves. They're under an ISO accreditation called ISO 17011. And so they're using Qualtrics for themselves to help maintain their own quality systems. Well, at this time, let's dive into the system itself and go through a demonstration of what you need to be looking for if you're considering automation for your organization. So the first page I'm coming to, this is an instance of Qualtrics, is the login screen for Qualtrics. Now, Qualtrics is a hosted-based system. And I will say in the year of COVID, this is becoming extremely handy for some of our customers. You know, if you're in a situation where you have to send some people home and to work from home, or if they are in a situation where you've got different groups of people in the laboratory at different times to make sure you're social distancing appropriately, having a hosted system is really great because it allows people to access Qualtrics from anywhere. So if people do need to access it from a home office or from a different location, they can just by using a web address like this. So I'm going to log in as Trevor. And when I log into the system, the first page I'm going to come to is our inbox. And your inbox is your to-do list. You know, one of those core areas that we talked about earlier is when you're looking for systems and you're considering automation, make sure your system has the ability to hold people accountable for the things that they need to complete within Qualtrics. So what am I looking at here? I'm seeing a number of tasks that are in Trevor's inboxes. And when you look at the task and you see these dots next to these action items, that's actually tied to this legend up here. So what that means is that every time there's a new action that Trevor needs to complete in Qualtrics, an automatic email notification is going to get sent to him, letting him know that he needs to come into Qualtrics and complete that task. And those automatic email notifications get sent out every time it approaches a different step in that legend. So anytime something's newly added, approaching its due date, is late, or needs to be expedited because at this point it's beyond late, Qualtrics will automatically send those email notifications out, making sure that those individuals are staying accountable. If somebody ignores those notifications, their manager gets notified or the quality manager gets notified, so people can step in if necessary. So let's talk with documents. So if you're considering automation with documents, one of the things that you really need to consider is just how you're storing your documents, right? If you have an electronic system, let's say you have a share folder and you have multiple documents, you probably already have a document tree that looks similar to this. Now, here's the trick. If you truly want automation software, what's happening here in Qualtrics is at no point in time could somebody come to this document list and get their hand on a document that's out of date. What Qualtrics is doing and what other quality management systems will do for you if they've got this automation feature is control and guarantee that it's not possible for somebody to get their hand on a document that's out of date. That's because on the back end of Qualtrics within the document, it's taking the necessary steps to take that risk out of the picture. So what you see here are a number of different documents that we have in the system. We take any type of document file. So though these are PDFs, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, videos, any type of document can come into Qualtrics. In fact, these PDF files are actually Word documents. I've just converted them to a PDF once they've been in Qualtrics. I'm going to click the sample handling menu. And when I open this up, you'll actually see that I have a document here for sample handling. Core information that you need for TNI or 17025 and your NELAC accreditations is making sure you're capturing this type of information on your documents. Publish date, who it was last approved by, the document ID and revision number. Good quality management software will update this information for you every time there's a new revision of that document. Because what happens, especially if you have a manual system, is you've got to go into every document revision and update this manually. Well, how many people here have to do that? And what they find is, oh, we forgot that step. And so we have to go through a whole nother revision of the document to make sure that we update that type of information. That doesn't need to happen anymore. Qualtrics will actually automate and make sure that this information is always up to date per the revision that's now published. So when I mentioned that Qualtrics is really controlling the document lifecycle, this is the process that documents go through within Qualtrics. And if you ever want to see this in action, let us know. We'll be happy to walk you through the full process. But at the end of the day, this is how we can guarantee that your documents are controlled to make sure that you meet the requirements of the standard that you're under. At some point, somebody's going to be notified when documents need to be edited. You know, a lot of our customers, especially our laboratories, are editing documents on either a yearly or bi-yearly basis just to make sure that they're always up to date. Once that document has been edited, we actually integrate with track changes with Word to make sure that you're pulling in the necessary changes that you made and they're being tracked within Qualtrics. You have the ability to send it out for additional review if you want to get feedback from your peers, or you can send it out for approval. Once at the approval step, it can either be rejected. We're going to make sure that somebody tells us why it's being rejected, or published. Once it's published, old published revisions will automatically be retired and watermarked and only available to specific people within the organization, usually that quality manager or whoever's taking on that quality manager role. You'll notice that there's a lot of arrows in this diagram. Those arrows represent email notifications. You have predefined in Qualtrics who needs to be responsible for the different steps of this process. And when it becomes their turn to take action, Qualtrics will automatically email them, letting them know that they need to take that action. I show you this because if we come back into Qualtrics and click on Properties, I'm going to click the history of this document. And when I come in here, this is that full audit history of the document. I can see that revision 13, it was my last revision. The editor was Trevor. It was started, released, and published on this date. This is the approval process it went through, and so on. And I can see that for every revision that this document has gone through. So if I go through to revision 11, I can view the past PDF of version 11. I can view the track change document that was changed with version 11. I can see who did what at what time, the full approval process, specifically what changes were made, and the edit reason. I can also see the full reviewer history here as well and their comments. So when your auditor comes in and your auditor asks you to see how you are tracking your documents, or they ask you to pull up, let's say, an SOP from 3 years ago that related to this corrective action request that you had, you can easily find those versions and then also show how you're controlling those versions. When you look at where Qualtrics got started, we stem from the ISO standard. So our system has specifically been developed to meet this type of requirement for your accreditations. And so it's definitely something to be looking out for. Now, we look at this diagram again and we get to this publish step. Now, as soon as you click publish in Qualtrics, the next step is usually, well, now I need to make sure that everybody in the organization is now familiar with that SOP and has read and acknowledged that they've read that SOP. Well, Qualtrics has that built in as well. So if I come back to our system, I'm going to go back to my inbox. We do that type of acknowledgements through acknowledgement testing. So here's an acknowledgement test for the sample handling manual that was recently published. Actually, it was published yesterday. I can see here that this is the link to the published new version of the document. And this is a test that will get sent out to everybody in your organization that now needs to be familiar with this test, asking them to please read this document, verify yes, and hit submit. So what is this replacing? If you have a manual system today, this is replacing the need to maybe print off the new version of the document or point people to the document in a share folder and then go out and have them sign the back of a document. Sometimes we've heard of organizations that will have clipboards that make sure that they have everyone's signature on a document. You don't have to do that anymore. What Qualtrics is going to do, as soon as that document is published, this test will automatically get sent out to everybody who needs it, where they'll get email notifications. They'll come in, read the document, hit yes, hit submit. Now quality managers automatically have that record that people have read and understood that document. The next question I always get is, well, how do you make sure somebody read that document? You have the power to change these to multiple choice, true, false questions, really tracking competency. Because if you want to make sure that somebody read this document, make your questions around those changes in that document, because if they don't read it, they won't be able to answer that test. The next, on the flip side, that's a pretty basic test, right? That's pretty easy. You know, send it out, they read the document, take a test, hit submit, done. At the same time, we can also do more detailed trainings within Qualtrics. So this is an example of a bloodborne pathogen training that we have in this demo system. where a training really can be a training on anything, right? If you have new people and new employees in the laboratory, maybe there's specific trainings that they need to go through. Job specific trainings is also something that you would see in here. OSHA, safety, bloodborne pathogens, job specific training. Our training module is something that you would be able to use to facilitate your trainings for your organization. You would come here and give a description of the training. So in this case, I need you to complete your annual bloodborne pathogen training. Because this is an annual training, it's going to recur. So at a certain point once a year, this training will pop back up in organization users' inboxes, telling them that they have to do this training. You'll get pointed to specific resources. So in this case, here's a document to look at. Here's a video to look at. This could even say, please go visit this person within the organization to learn how to do this specific job qualification training. Really, you have the ability to adapt these how you want them. Once that person is done with that training, they'll type in when that training was complete, maybe even attach a file of completion or certification, and hit training is complete. The system will then prompt them to take an exam. So here's a good example of multiple choice, true, false questions. The system will automatically grade this for you and let you know if people pass or fail. So what this actually is going to replace is the need to bring everybody into a conference room, go through a PowerPoint, give them a test, grade those tests manually. You don't have to do that anymore. Now organizations can just facilitate this through their training systems and systems like Qualtrics, and all of that's going to be done automatically for you. And then you would just report on those records. So if I go back to my inbox, let's say I fail this test. The nice thing about this is that even if I do fail this test or choose not to take it at that time, you'll still see that it's here in my tests that need to be complete. And it will not leave my inbox until I physically complete this test. Visibility, it's something we talked about a lot. Well, let's talk about some of the reports that you'll be able to run within Qualtrics around this. The most popular report that we have, and I think it's because it's very colorful, is our training matrix. Training matrices are reports that often auditors will ask for. And so this is a great way to be able to show them what that looks like in Qualtrics. It's a way to choose all of your users, choose all of the trainings that you've set up for those users, and be able to see what they have and have not completed in the system. So you can see that we have some trainings that are still being developed that haven't been sent out yet. We have some that have and nobody's been taking them. And then we have some where they have completed some of that work here. This is a great way to have that visibility into the system to be able to see how people are interacting with Qualtrics, what they're completing and what they're not. On top of that, everybody will also have access to their own personnel records. So if you're an organization right now that has personnel records that are in a binder that you, every time somebody takes a new training, you have to update that binder, or you're going to HR to help with that, you don't have to do that anymore. That person will be able to come into Qualtrics, access their personnel file, and be able to see their training records down here. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk today about are our workflows. Workflows are ways to automate processes where each step is defined and automatic routes are going to be linked with email alerts, really holding people accountable to those processes, and more importantly, collecting the necessary information that quality managers and lab directors need to make sure that they're in compliance to the standards and the processes that they've put in place for themselves. I'm going to click on this workflow button over here. And when I open this up, you'll see a number of workflows over here that have asterisks on them. These are our best-in-class workflows. Now, I will tell you, you guys are the first group to actually ever see these best-in-class workflows. There's something that we are currently working on right now, and they are very specific to the TNI NELAC standard. These are these best-in-class workflows. So what we have done is taken the TNI and NELAC standard and talked to a number of our customers and even some of our prospects that are under TNI and NELAC to be like, okay, what are some of the core processes that you have to prove today that you have for your standard that could benefit from automation? And this is really where we landed with some of the consensus we heard back from the feedback. First, audit workflows. So making sure that you can track both internal and external workflow or audits. when they're going to happen, who's going to be involved in them, what information you need to have for those audits, and so on, and being able to track the corrective action requests or CAPAs that come out of those audits and the work that needs to be involved in that. The next workflow is nonconformance reports. So making sure that you just have a way to track all of the nonconformances that could potentially happen in your organization. This is this is a workflow that's actually linked to our corrective action workflow as well, because you can imagine, and we'll actually go through this one today, anytime somebody logs a nonconformance, it may result in a corrective action. It may not result in a corrective action. However, this workflow allows you to make sure that you're tracking all of those. The corrective action workflow is going to be a way for you to go through root cause investigation and make sure that you put in a plan, and then make sure that that plan is effective by having specific follow-up. Equipment maintenance and launcher. The equipment maintenance is actually one of those processes, and we've heard this from our accrediting body partners, that when some of the shifts and what's happening as some of the standards shift to the newer versions, which I believe TNI will happen in a couple of years, equipment maintenance is often an area where laboratories are finding nonconformances, because sometimes calibrations get lost or the records get lost. Maybe they don't happen in the time that they're supposed to. Maybe you don't have proof that they did happen. And what's happening in Qualtrics is we're actually creating a workflow to help manage this, to make sure that those calibrations and those equipment maintenance activities are being tracked, and that you can prove that they are being tracked, and you can prove those records. And so that's really what this workflow is around. And then last but not least, demonstrations of capability, which we hear often from our environmental customers, that this is an area that they really could use some help with in terms of just tracking the amount of capability tracking that needs to happen, especially with the TNI and the NELAC standards. So this is a very, very new one that we have in the system as well. I show you this report because we're really excited to share these with our prospects and anybody that's considering using Qualtrics, because these as best in class will automatically come in your system for you. So let's talk about, well, what does this look like? I'm going to start with this nonconformance report. This is an example of a workflow in Qualtrics. So you can see here, and I'm a very big picture person, so let's talk about the diagram that's down here first. With this diagram, what's happening is it's not many steps. However, what's happening is we're capturing the data so we can report on it later, and it can kick off necessary actions if it needs to. So the first step is just reporting the nonconformance. What happened? Every time you see an arrow associated with these processes, that represents email notifications and inbox notifications, because those notifications are letting other people know when they have a task that they need to complete in the system, and holding them accountable for getting that done in a timely manner. So you don't have to go and knock on somebody's lab station or workbench and say, hey, did you get that finished? You don't have to do that. Qualtrics is going to keep reminding them to get that done. And if they don't do it, their manager will be notified. So reporting that nonconformance. So let's just say that we saw that there was a piece of equipment that wasn't properly taken out of service. Okay. Somebody recognized this. Maybe the source was just an internal observation. You can see here that we have a couple of other options. Maybe it was something that came through management review or proficiency testing or internal auditing. In this case, we'll just say that somebody noticed this and it was an internal staff observation. As soon as I hit submit, what this would mean is that it will automatically get sent to the next appropriate person in line. Now, being Trevor, being a quality manager, you can imagine this is automatically going to come to me. However, if it wasn't Trevor, it was somebody else, you could actually allow them to be notified in the system. When it goes to the next step, you can see the information that was submitted in step 1, and then I'm guiding that person through the next steps. Think of this as a fillable form that's been separated into steps with notifications between those steps. So review for possible nonconformance. So yes, this is a nonconformance. A corrective action is needed. What was happening? They missed the calibration notification that came through their Outlook calendar or something like that. Therefore, it was never completed. So is a corrective action needed? Yes, because we actually, this is a deficiency against the process that we put in place for our organization. So yes, a corrective action is needed. And then fill out that nonconformance report. Well, when did this happen? Let's say it happened yesterday. You could choose a specific section of your organization it happened in. You could actually link to the specific standards within the TNI requirements that say how you track your equipment, or if you're under 17025. Possible give a description of the nonconformance, and was there any immediate action taken. Qualtrics is guiding those individuals filling out this information exactly what they need to fill in, so the next person in line has that information so they can move forward with the process. You can even attach supporting documentation. So if there's pictures or emails or anything like that that you want to attach to these records, you can do that as well. Was work stopped? We'll say yes. When was it stopped? When was it resumed? Maybe we were able to calibrate it that same day and be able to move forward and put that piece of equipment back online. The next area, who's going to be responsible for cause analysis and plan development? This will actually allow you to choose other people within your organization who now are going to be responsible for this step of the process. Well, again, because I want to keep it with me, I'm going to use Trevor. And at this point, the review is complete, and I would hit review complete. You'll notice the workflow went away. That step of the process is completely done. However, what happened here, that nonconformance has been logged, but because a corrective action was needed, it actually kicked off another process within Qualtrics. It kicked off our corrective action workflow. And I can see that by coming to my inbox, clicking this, and I can actually see that corrective action request action right here. So I can open this. I can see when it occurred, any of the information that was submitted, and then I can see the next appropriate steps. So if I scroll down here to my corrective action request workflow, you'll notice that this is a completely different process. It starts at root cause investigation. So whoever's getting notified, so in this case, it would be Trevor or whoever it would be in the organization, they would then go through root cause, where then you're sending it through plan development and plan review. And once that plan has been finalized, it'll go through implementation. The next step is effectiveness review. And I'll tell you what we hear from the accrediting bodies is effectiveness review is actually a step that often gets missed as well, because it's usually a date in the future. It's not something on people's minds. And so when they have to do it, they sometimes forget to, and then the auditor comes in and flags them on it. With Qualtrics, it's not possible to forget it because the system's going to remind you to get that finished when the time period you set for yourself expires. So definitely a way to control that automation to make sure that things are being done and people are being held accountable for their actions. And then eventually that would be closed. At the end of the day, the reason why you're collecting this information and you're going through workflows is so that you can report on it later. When you report within Qualtrics, you're going to get a standard group of reports that automatically look like this, but then you're also going to have the ability to create your own reports as well. Some of the reports that we like to always dive into are specific ones like around corrective action requests and such. And so you would have the ability to look at that type of information too through this. At the end of the day with workflows, we're controlling the process so you can have those details available to you. On top of the best-in-class workflows that come automatically in your system, you also have the ability to create your own. So we have a couple of our water authority organizations who have created very detailed custom corrective action request processes for their organization that really speak specifically to their organization's needs. So if that's something that would work better for you, that's an option as well. You also have the ability to take the best-in-class workflows and adapt them to best fit your organization's needs. So for example, like if you have specific requirements for your corrective action process for your lab, or you adopt them over time, we'll actually teach you during the training of Qualtrics how to update those and really make them your own for your organization. So lots of options there in terms of how that works. I will say, when I mentioned that when you're identifying if you want to go towards quality management systems, if you really want to dive in and try to look at your options, being able to configure your system is something that should be really important. The idea of quality and TNI and the whole purpose is to identify risks and opportunities of improvement for your organization. Your electronic quality management system, if you choose to go that automated route, should have the ability to also be adjusted, because as your organization grows and as your quality system grows, by nature of quality, your processes will change. And if your system is not created to be able to adapt that change or even promote that change, what you'll find is that it'll be more limiting in the long run. All in all, that's really what to be looking for when you're considering quality systems. If you're really going to take that extra step in that approach with automation, it's something, these are features and benefits really to consider. As I mentioned, we have a number of different types of organizations that use Qualtrics. Even our smaller organizations that use the system, the reason why they ultimately bring Qualtrics in is because they're looking for a way to help lessen the burden of the person that is that quality manager. With some of our laboratories that are sometimes 10 people or less, they don't necessarily have somebody that's a dedicated quality manager. They'll sometimes have somebody that is a lab director or a technician that's been given that role. Well, they're already doing two different jobs. So adding quality in there is sometimes really limiting. And so organizations usually of that size will sometimes consider bringing Qualtrics in just to act as almost another employee in those types of situations and scenarios. All right. The other thing about your systems and when you're considering systems and you're considering quality management solutions, make sure you're looking at the company too and kind of their background. Are they are they working with organizations that are similar to ours? What do their customers say about them? Are their customers happy with the services that they provide? I can speak on Qualtrics's behalf since I work from Qualtrics that we put a lot of energy into our customer base. We want to know what's going well. We want to know what's not going well so we can make sure that we're putting the efforts into to help fix that ourselves. Our organization, we're under ISO 9001. In fact, we just had our audit about 3 weeks ago, and we use Qualtrics to manage our own accreditation efforts. So we're very familiar with the system and what it can do and and some of those benefits it can bring to an organization. But we're also familiar with that compliance pressure and know what it's like to be on the other side of it. What kind of support does an organization give you? Is it through the phone? Is it through email? Is it unlimited, or are they going to charge you every time that you reach out? Do they really take the time to go through and train you on the software to make sure you get the most out of your investment? That's another great question to ask. It's in our minds, we want to make sure that you have the tools available to have a great experience with Qualtrics and your quality management system. And so we put that investment in up front. We also have our own users conference. And I will tell you, our last users conference, we had a group of environmental laboratories come in, and they actually created their own group so they could share workflows and share ideas on Qualtrics and just share their own experiences with the system. And it was really great to see. We have an amazing user base. And I think what's really neat about the environmental space is that, you see it, NEMAC was just a couple weeks ago, how collaborative those spaces are, and people really want to learn off of each other. And what we've seen is that type of camaraderie and connections have actually come through in Qualtrics as well. Because we'll have organizations that share workflows, share best practices specifically around TNI and ELAC. So at this point, that really kind of brings me to the end of our presentation today. Thank you so very much for everybody that came and participated. I apologize for that technical difficulty in the beginning, but it happens. So thank you for hanging on there with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those into the Q&A section, and I'll be happy to address those. If you're interested in learning more about Qualtrics, I've seen actually some of you that are on today. We've talked to you before, so thank you for coming again. If you're interested in learning more or want to get some more information, around costs or implementation or configurabilities and functionality, please let us know. We'd be happy to help you out. I'll wait a couple more seconds, see if we have anything coming in. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, so very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.